Alright guys, MTech Guy here. Now it's that time of year again where we're going to take a look at what it's taken to keep this M5 on the road and in good shape over the last 12 months. And as I've owned this car for 5 years now, I thought 5 years will be a nice round figure where we'll take a look at everything that it's taken over the last 5 years. So I'll start off by taking a look at the last 12 months and then we'll go right back to that first year and we'll just work our way through the previous 4 years so we can see exactly the amount of parts that I've thrown at this thing to keep it ticking along nicely, in good shape and not letting me down. And to be honest, she's getting old now. It's 19 years old this year, nearly 20 years old for an old car like this. It ain't going bad. In the 5 years that I've owned it, it's never let me down. The worst that I've had with it was there was a few occasions where I've had a reduced engine power with a check engine light. Two separate occasions was a failed ignition coil, and then nothing until just recently. I've had some issues with DSC faults. It took me a little while to work through them. You'll have seen that if you've been following the channel, and as it turned out it was just a failed wheel speed sensor, so no big deal. The car was drivable even when it went into fail-safe mode, and even a few years ago when I was having trouble with my alternator and battery, it still didn't let me down. It gave me enough warning to get them items sorted before it was too late and I was ended up stranded on the side of the road. And even though this car's nearly 20 years old, I've not had any oil leaks from that engine, and it certainly wouldn't be the same if it was an M54 or an N52. Them things leak oils like a sieve, and they don't need many years on them before they do start leaking, but all the gaskets still in good shape, no oil leaks. And to be honest, I've found it a really well put together engine, the S85. And ever since I started this channel, I've been putting the message out there on how reliable these cars actually are, in contrary to everything that's said about these vehicles all over the internet. And you know what? I thought we was getting to a point now where it's becoming obvious that these cars are getting pretty old now, and what we're seeing is that they are reliable cars as long as you look after them properly. That's what I've been saying for the last 4 and a bit years on this channel, and that's the feedback I've been getting from the majority of my viewers who own these vehicles also. So yeah, I thought we were just getting to the point where what is reality was becoming evident on the internet. We've got an M car in front of us. It's nearly 20 years old and it's been one of the most reliable cars that I've ever owned. Anyhow, never mind about all that, let's get into it. Okay, so the last 12 months, what's it taken? Well, we started off with the windshield cowl, got that one replaced just because it was getting a bit faded with the UV damage. It wasn't really getting tatty around the actual seal around the bottom of the windscreen, but it just wanted to tidy up, so I put a new one in there. Also did the 2 engine evap valves that sit in the valley of the V10 there. There was nothing wrong with the ones that were on the car, it was just a preventative maintenance job. The original ones were on there, they'd lasted 18 years, so I should be all set with them new ones on there for the next 18 years or so. Then I had a look at the passenger side seat thigh support. The gear was broken in there, the little plastic gear, so we replaced that for a brass one. Now that's working as good as gold, and as it should do. And then one thing that had bothered me since I'd owned the vehicle was the boot lid. The trunk opened way too quickly, so I got the boot shock spring on the right hand side there changed out for a new one, and it opens nice and properly now, nice and smooth, and it's not going to try and take my chin off every time it opens. And following on from that, I had some issues with my original key. I've got the original diamond key and then a second diamond key that I use as a spare. Now I try and alternate them every now and again just to keep them charged through the ignition there, but the main one I use most of the time, the internal battery failed in that one. Now in the diamond keys the battery's not serviceable, so it's not like I could just pull it out and replace it, so rather than mess around try to cut the key open and resolder a new one in there, we did the job properly and I just got a replacement key. And it is worth mentioning that this is a really early E60 M5, a 2005, and these came with an actual diamond key, not the little box push-in one with the start button. Then we've got a brake fluid change done, that's just a regular 2-yearly service item, so no big deals there. And then following on with some more service items, got the differential oil changed out and also got the breather hole in the rear cover cleaned out. Got the SMG hydraulic fluid changed out, which I hadn't done since I'd owned a vehicle, and it was certainly a job worth doing because the old stuff that came out was looking pretty dirty. So I've got some nice fresh hydraulic oil in there for the SMG now. I've got the SMG gear oil changed out as well in the gearbox itself, and also got the little strainer filter cleaned out. And then following on from that, we've got the oil level sensor replaced. Now this is something that's given me a lot of grief since I owned the car. I've never been able to get a proper true oil level reading, and again, with this being an early model, it had a different style of level sensor in the bottom of the engine there, so I replaced it out for the revised version. Haven't had any issues since. And then just recently I got the right hand upper suspension arm guide link replaced. Now it wasn't worn at all, but the little ball joint boot was split, it was losing grease, we'll be letting water in, so before it got all worn out I just replaced it with a new one. And then, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, we've got one of the wheel speed sensors replaced because it was starting to fail, starting to give me grief, throwing all kinds of codes related to the DSC system. The sensor's changed out now. That seems to have resolved the issues. So there we go, that's the last 12 months. Not really a big deal, nothing major on the list there. So right, let's go right back to 5 years ago and we'll look at the previous 4 years. So I'll just run through each item. I'll put this list together here. And oh boy, it's quite a long list when you actually compound it all together like that. So let's take a look. Right, so if we go right back to just before I bought the car, the previous owner had had one throttle actuator done, one ignition coil replaced, 2 Vanos solenoids, the front control arms and 2 front tyres. And then when I purchased the vehicle 5 years ago, it got a pre-sale service done on the vehicle, had a high pressure Vanos line replaced, and while the oil pan was off, they did the rod bearings, also had a new rear window seal because the other one was looking pretty tatty. And then moving into my first year of ownership, I went through and did all the fluids and filters apart from that SMG hydraulic fluid, but did all the others. Had a headlight motor replaced, the left side, the bonnet release cable was replaced because the original one snapped on me. And that was an interesting job, trying to get the bonnet open to be able to access the broken cable to get it replaced. I did a headlamp washer pump because although the original one was working fine, it was leaking. I did all the belts, pulleys and tensioners at the front of the engine just as a matter of course, as part of a preventative maintenance item. The thermostat was starting to fail on me, so replaced the thermostat, did the PCV valves and the valve covers there, again preventative maintenance. Replaced the charcoal canister, and it had a new battery. Right, now moving on to the second year, I refurbished the right hand headlight lens because it was getting a little bit faded. I did the front sway bar end links and I did the rear sway bar end links. I had a new set of front EDC struts. Now that's probably the most expensive item that this car's had in my ownership, and it's the one item that has made the biggest noticeable difference once it was replaced. It really brought the suspension back alive, and it was not easy to tell how much them front shocks had worn so much. They're actually leaking fluid, so that's why they were replaced. I had an alternator, and then I replaced the SMG relays, preventative maintenance, and a new set of spark plugs. It had 3 oil changes during that year. New set of engine air filters. I pulled out both mass airflow sensors, gave them a good clean. I had new microfilters. I did the fuel filter, which sits in the left side of the petrol tank there. Had a differential pinion seal because that was leaking oil, and also got a rear parking sensor that had failed. Third year, it didn't need much at that point because I'd done a lot of preventative maintenance up to that point. So I remedied some sunroof noise just by giving the mechanism a bit of a lubrication. Replaced the front passenger side cup holder because the original wasn't operating properly. Had 2 oil changes, and I also put a new set of fuel injectors in there. That's a big preventative maintenance item on these vehicles. And then the 4th year, last year, I did a throttle body actuator. Now the one I replaced hadn't failed, it wasn't really giving me any grief, but I wanted to get a new one on there to match the other new one that was done just before I bought the vehicle. And the one I removed from the vehicle, we pulled it apart and the gears were showing signs of wear, so it's nice that I've got a pretty much new set on there, so moving forward shouldn't give me any grief. And put a new set of badges throughout the car, the front and rear of the car and the wheels, just because the originals were starting to get a bit faded, a bit tatty. Another rear parking sensor needed replacing, one of the originals had failed again. Got 2 oil changes and did the pollen filters again. So there we have it. It is quite a comprehensive list, but there's nothing major on there, and most of it is either maintenance items or, alright, I've been quite overboard with the preventative maintenance items, but I've always found with this vehicle and any BMW that I've owned, that's the way to head into the ownership and go about it. So I certainly have not found this vehicle to be an unreliable vehicle or expensive to run. To be honest, the biggest expense that I have found with this vehicle has been the fuel. This thing loves to drink fuel. I average about 4.6 kilometers per litre, so to be honest with you, the most amount of money you're going to be spending on this vehicle is on fuel, not so much on maintenance items. But anyhow, you guys that own these vehicles or the equivalent M6s from the same era, let me know in the comments below how you've found your ownership experience with regards to the money that you've had to spend on it, the parts that you've had to put in it and whatnot. Now, if you found this video interesting or useful, don't forget to give it a like, and make sure you go and check out the rest of my YouTube channel for more BMW E60 M5 content. Consider subscribing if that's your cup of tea. I'm MTech Guy. Thanks a lot for watching.